Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest stories in MMA. And on today's episode, Mackenzie Dern taps Amanda Ribas. It's now 1-1 between them. Do we need to see a trilogy at some point? Henry Cejudo and Dominick Cruz are set to fight next month in Seattle. Yes! And can Islam Makhachev break a long-standing record this Saturday at UFC 311? Let's talk about it. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con. And look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's here in Las Vegas. He created SBC, for crying out loud. Danny Segura. He's down in Miami, the other side of this great nation. He's our SBC coordinator. And Dan Tom, our fight analyst. He's also here with us in the fight capital of the world. Always brings the energy. Cold Coffee. He's going to be on the ones and twos. Another Vegas guy, and shout out to his Buckeyes. Good luck with that one, Cold Coffee. Let's get going. The first show of the year took place this past weekend for the MMA leader. Going in on paper, I'm not gonna lie, the fight card was meh, right? But on Saturday, I was pausing my NFL playoffs viewing experience because I was jumping out of my chair. Guys, we had 9 finishes in that smaller octagon inside the Apex. That fight night was definitely money, in my opinion. Let's start at the top. Dan, Tom, your reaction, man, to the event, getting things started here in 2025, and Dern's outstanding performance versus Amanda Ribas. Go!
You know, it was an underrated card. I do want to give her that credit. And it kind of was like, and not as good, by the way. One of the best cards last year, by the way, was that UFC Macau card that went under the radar. But I bring it up because it was kind of like this card where not a lot of expectations. And you got a ton of finishes. I mean, that Macau card produced like 2 KO of the year contenders toward the end of the year. I don't think we got anything quite that way with this card, but there was a lot to talk about. A lot of positives, but also some negatives with some of the refereeing, especially in that Chris Curtis Roman Kopylov fight. That I don't know if you guys caught, but again, we kind of have, once again, the referees not putting on their big boy pants, doing that thing that Herb Dean coined because Joe Rogan coined him as the best, so he must know what he's talking about when he says, "Don't get me involved." And we used to go, "Oh, wow, he doesn't want to get involved. Look at that. Wow, isn't that the kind of cops we want, right? To not write you the ticket." But at a certain point, there are laws for a reason, guys. There are rules for a reason. And I don't know, isn't the athletic commission supposed to be there to protect the fighters despite constantly denying their appeals? Getting the judging wrong, or making gross errors like from Gary Copeland, Chris Weidman to Bruno Silva, atrocity last year to not quite as bad. But we got instances like this where Roman Kopylov fouled Chris Curtis twice in the second round and coincidentally coincides with a momentum change. Now, first warnings in the back, it's not about intent, it's about effect on the fight. And referees are given the tools to level it out. However, they don't want to put their big boy pants in. No one wants to be blamed. And I feel like I'm in an episode of The Wire here with how broken these empty suited government commissions are. So just wanted to throw that out there.
All right, Dan, well, let me throw right back at you. Any thoughts on Mackenzie Dern's big win over Amanda Ribas?
Sorry. Mackenzie, I went off on that trip, but I agree with that one. I think we might see a trilogy, sadly, because the UFC loves rematches. I mean, look, we started the year with the rematch, folks. The first 2 cards are headlined for a rematch, folks. Let's go to the first 2 pay-per-view headlines. Those are rematches too. Guys, who's been calling this? It's not almost like there's been nobody on this very show, guys, calling this very trend since 2022. Will you guys wake up and smell the coffee? What is up with the rematches? If we go to Mick and Sean's Pornhub, it's going to be, if they're trending searches, it's going to be big boobs, rematches, orgies. Like, that's how the order is going to go at this point. Like, it's a fetish at this point. Someone needs to seek help. Stop with the rematches. Stop.
That's why I went with Dan first, because I knew he'd have a take on the rematches. That's been a long-standing stance, and I'm feeling them, man. Sometimes it's like, come on, you have 800 people on the roster. You can't put 2 other heads together. But hey, shout out to to Mackenzie Dern. She got the submission. Good stuff there. Danny, how about you, man? Let's get a reaction from you. First event of the year. Were you pumped to see some of these finishes and just kind of get things going again for 2025?
Yeah, it was a nice little break from the sport, but now we're back, and it feels good to be back. And unlike Dan, I actually like this fight. I actually like the rematch. It was a good sort of measuring stick to see how far Mackenzie Dern has come in her career. It's been 5 years since the 2 last fought. That was in October 2019 in Tampa, Florida. I remember I was in covering that card live. And just watching her original performance, or her first performance against Amanda Ribas in the lead up to this fight, and then watching her fight, there was a clear progression here in skill, and that's what you want to see from Mackenzie Dern. So she's come a long way. I think the result speaks about it, just because obviously she lost the first one, and now she gets a finish here in the second one. And I gotta say, like, Mackenzie Dern, I feel like has disappointed some people in terms of like her prospects of potentially being champion, this and that. But if you're a Mackenzie Dern fan, this has to be a good sign. I mean, there was some evolution there. We saw her a lot more confident in her strikes. Her jiu-jitsu has always been good, but it seems that it's a little bit more adapted to MMA now. I liked it. I thought she looked great.
Okay, how about you, Goes? What was your takeaway from this main event?
I think Dan's going to hate me because I did say last week I felt like these girls were destined to fight 3 times. The first time was amazing. This last fight was pretty good too. I think you can kind of tell how much has been weighing on Mackenzie Dern's shoulders just by her reaction at the end of the fight, how much this fight meant to her. And, you know, I thought she did a good job of kind of bottling her intensity in spurts, right? Like there's times where her striking has improved, but it's a little wild and her defense is not so well. I think sometimes her emotions gets the best of her in fights, and I think this time she kind of just dialed in that aggression. She was still aggressive, but she wasn't sloppy, and I thought that was kind of the difference in this fight. And Amanda Ribas, she was still able to do things that I thought were successful for her in the first fight, but Mackenzie sort of had an answer for them, right? And I thought that was pretty interesting for her. She's such a marketable fighter. I think it's such a good win for her here to kind of get this one back and put her in a decent position. Overall, and thank God the fights are back. I actually enjoyed this card.
Very marketable. I was telling Danny Segura yesterday, look, respect to 1.3 million in China. There's not an Apex, sorry, a PI there. I know the UFC wants to have big names in China, but I really think they got themselves something with Dern if she were to ever get to the point where she holds gold. We'll see. She does have a key win over Verna Jandarova years ago. I don't know if it's enough to trump Verna Jandarova, who's probably on standby for Suarez versus Zhang Weili. Or am I wrong, Danny? What do you think here regarding championship aspirations for Dern?
This was a tough one because, yeah, she does have a win over her, and Mackenzie Dern has been looking good, and she's very marketable, as you mentioned. And I would say a lot more marketable than Verna Jandarova, right? She's coming off a main event win, this and that. So if you kind of follow the UFC math, it would make sense that she'd be next. But for sporting purposes, I do hope that Verna Jandarova is next because she's what, a 5 fight winning streak. She's looking great. And you know, fair is fair. Like, you know, if you go out there and get good wins, like, you should go up in the division. You should be up for big opportunities. And I'm kind of glad also to hear from Mackenzie Dern that she's not really out there campaigning for a title shot. She obviously wants one, but it doesn't seem like she feels ready to be fighting for a belt right now. So yeah, Verna should be next. I do like Mackenzie Dern's chances though, knowing how the UFC works. But I hope she's not next. I hope that Verna takes the winner of Zhang Weili versus Tatiana Suarez.
But her championship promise is alive, right, Segura?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, as I said earlier, like I've been a big fan of Mackenzie Dern, and I've been on that sort of hype train for a long time. You know, even before she entered the UFC and she got that developmental deal where she was fighting in like LFA and regional promotions, I'm like, this girl's gonna not only be a superstar, but she's gonna be a champion. And she's fallen short a little bit. I felt like she was gonna get to the top, but maybe a little bit sooner. She's not there yet. But look, you look at that performance. You look at how dangerous she could be. You can't discard her from winning the belt. So hopefully 2025 is a big year for her because I do agree that she has a lot of star potential and the title hopes are still alive. I think they are. I think they are.
What would you do with Dern next, Goes? If you're the UFC, since it's pretty obvious, we got Weili against Suarez in February in Australia, and then we got Verna on hold for the winner, we'll say, right? But I don't think Dern should wait that out because that puts her probably to the end of 2025 without doing anything. That's been a strategy for some, but I think staying busy is more important. Do you have a name you could maybe put her in with to keep her busy in the meantime?
Yeah, I mean, you always want to fight the people that are ahead of you. And right now that just kind of doesn't work out. I think she's in a good spot where she's relatively on the same timeline as the champions. You know, she doesn't have to wait that long. But I would say maybe like a Jessica Andrade, who she took an L from before, and she just had a loss as well. Maybe something like that to kind of hold her off. But
She
there's just
did, but I
no.
think it was at flyweight and at
Mhm.
strawweight. She's won her last two, so it's
Yeah,
weird because she's like Hebus. She fluctuates, and so there's a little bit of momentum in one weight class, but not another. But former champ, and she is a name, so they're fight night main event material, I guess, is
definitely.
if that's
I,
what
I
you're
think
thinking.
I think it's a fun fight, but the thing is, like, there's just no at the top. There's no fight that you can give her that's really going to be like a safe fight or something like that, right? Because the UFC knows what they have. She's very marketable. She's a good fighter. She's got that, the mother angle that I think a lot of people gravitate to.
Hmm,
So you would
true.
think they would probably want to help her out a little bit, but that's just difficult to do. There's a lot of good fighters at the top, so I think it's unavoidable for her.
Yeah. All right. Well, this fight card produced a lot of other highlights as well. It wasn't just, I mean, it was top heavy in the sense that the two ladies was the fight that everyone was looking forward to the most. Like I said, on paper, it just didn't jump out at you this fight night. We're going to discuss another fight night in February that's really, really got us floored. But hey, who else performed on this fight card, Dan Tom, that you want to give a little bit of a love to? Or hey, if you want to go back to the reffing, there was a lot of stuff that went on with that we can definitely wax on as well, because I have some thoughts too. But it's your show, bro.
No worries. Yeah, no. So I went a little early on that point, but I just want to say that yeah, certain refs are a bit shaky. No offense to Mark Smith, did excellent service. For our country. He has some excellent stoppages on his record, by the way, because he's a former pilot with those eyes. However, he and Dan Mergliata have that kind of shaky thing. Big Dan's a little more of a nice guy about it, But because of that indecisive energy that they kind of just have about them, you see that in their stoppages. Conversely, whereas referees like Herb Dean and Keith Peterson, who look like they're asleep on the steering wheel, coincidentally, those guys seem to be a little late to stop the fights, guys. You know what I'm saying? So I know I'm doing like obvious outside deduction here, but there is work to show. I'm not the guy that comes on here to just trashes the refs or the judges. Like I can actually name them by name, the fights they've done from years back and their trends for what it's worth. But I want to highlight Puna Soriano. I just highlighted Chris Curtis, an Extreme Couture guy, kind of getting jobs. How about my other homie there from Extreme Couture? Got to be a little biased. The Southpaw Hawaiian Puna Soriano getting back on track, going 2-0 to welterweight, coming through as a big dog. Gotta feel good for that guy. He just seems like one of the good dudes.
For sure. I mean, he looks like a monster at 170. Already looked pretty decent at middleweight, but yeah, at 170, he is the truth goes. How about you? Another highlight.
Man, Cesar Almeida's KO was just so nasty. I mean, like we've seen so many of these, but it was just pinpoint right on the button, and the way he fell back and hit his head was just nasty. It's one of those you live by the sword, you die by the sword, and I know it's early, but this has got to be one of the candidates for a KO of the year early on.
And it looked like he was going to get KO'd right before he countered. It was beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
comeback there. Danny Segura, how about you, man?
I gotta shout out Santiago Poncinibio. This is a guy that I've been covering forever. 30, almost 38 years old, still in a co-main event spot, still picking up finishes. Picked up a third round stoppage. I mean, the guy's been fighting in the UFC since 2013, like well over a decade. That's hard to do, and he's been doing it at the top level. So, and let's not forget, like before the pandemic and before he had that life-threatening infection that not only put his career on hold for several years, but also his entire life. The dude was a top 5 welterweight in the world, and he was on a crazy win streak. I feel like he doesn't get his respect. He doesn't get his due. So I want to shout him out. A great win and also just a great career. I feel like people don't talk about this guy enough.
Ponzi had a great scheme on Saturday, and he came through,
He
man, for
did.
sure. All right, I want to give a highlight to Christian Rodriguez. I remember when they put him up against Raul Rosas, right? It was basically the feature, to highlight Raul Rosas and what a prodigy he is. And C-Rod had something for him in Miami last year. And then this year he comes in against another highly touted guy, a guy that Goza and I spoke to a few weeks ago, Austin Bashi, right? And huge underdog. And I was like, there's something to be said for how this guy is rising up and fighting some of these prospects that they're throwing at him. I'm seeing some things here. He stays calm. He's a really, really calm fighter. I would almost say too calm. But calm is dangerous, I've been told. Those guys that can slow the game down But this is what I was impressed with, guys. Honestly, he has, you know, a lot of fighters going back to even Chuck Liddell. I remember had sprawls, right, where they could neutralize takedowns. But what I like is he thrusts his hip first, and sometimes that's enough to just buck off the wrestler. But if the wrestler does go through and follow through with his takedown attempt, his double or whatever, that's when he'll resort to the sprawl. And then all of a sudden he just starts going through these mechanics where he's not going to let you grab the single and let you go through your sequences. He had some wrist control against the fence that he would do. And then he had those, what is it, Dan? Like an M&I rolls. I mean, he had so many different ways of getting out of, getting out of all these different attempts to get out grappled, you know. And through all that, you know, he's talking a little bit of smack, you know, and then through all that, Bashi still had a chance because he banked around to possibly sneak in and get a takedown and maybe lay on him and just get out of there with one of those types of wins that a lot of younger wrestlers do. But C-Rod was not having it. He had a beautiful uppercut. You know, I've said this before years ago. I'm not into buying apparel for MMA fighters. I'm an MMA fan. I'm a fan of the UFC and all that. But I remember Paul Felder was one guy, just because he didn't stand out. I was like, man, I wouldn't mind getting his kit just to be different from everyone, right? I'm on the Mario Batista train just to be different from everyone. I'm on the C-Rod train, man. Okay. Maybe I'll go to Venom and see what he's got. I don't know, something about this guy. I just really, really dig him. Great card to start things off. And any guys want to say anything real quick about the Mark Smith, Chris Curtis stoppage? You know, Dan talked a little bit about it, but Danny, did you have a problem with it, or did you understand? You know, had he not run in, you know, maybe Kopylov gets one kick in, I suppose, at the end. Although Kopylov stated he didn't want to hurt him, he thought he was basically down at that point, so there was no need. We do hear that 10-second warning, so Mark Smith in his head knows the end of the fight is approaching, or at least the end of the round is approaching. How do you unpack all that?
Well, you know, he got dropped, right? Like the optics were definitely not good, and I think if he would have gone to a decision, I didn't like his chances either. So, honestly, I understand why he could be upset, but I don't think it's like the worst call in the world. Like I don't have like a huge issue with it.
Goes?
I think he could have gave him a little bit more time. It didn't look good the way he went down, but we have seen fighters kind of roll over on their back and recover, especially, you know, hearing the 10-second clapper. But I don't hate it, but it's just not doing your job. I think you have to give him that little cushion for one more shot and see. You know, Kopylov wasn't really rushing in either, so there was kind of time to decipher what was going on. It's unfortunate, you know, these things happen, and it's a difficult job. What I hate is sometimes they tend to happen in spurts for referees. You know, they lose a little bit of confidence and kind of snowballs a little bit. I hope Mark can recover from this, but yeah, that kind of sucked.
And Dan,
I just want to clarify again, because I saw it in the chat and I saw this in the timeline. It's not the stoppage that I'm complaining about or you should be complaining about. It's the fouls. It's what led to the Kopylov momentum. Curtis had clear momentum. It almost looked like he was going to be getting Kopylov, not just winning the round, but it looked like he was on his way to getting Kopylov out of there in round 2, who traditionally gasses. Kopylov does have like a late second win, but it doesn't help the fact that literally 2 fouls happened that no consequences were made for. And that's where the momentum change happens. That's the issue, guys. This has happened in many fights before. This has happened in Chris Curtis fights before. That's the issue. It's not the stoppage, although Mark Smith is awkward as shit, like I just explained. It's not the stop. It's the fouls. Start accounting for them, please. Thank you.
There you go.
All right, I think guys. Dan's probably going to be the next person getting kicked out of a plane next time he flies.
Probably, yeah. Probably.
All right, guys. Let's move on to the next topic. We can always circle back if there's time at the end. And hey, start leaving your comments and questions. I'm going to try and highlight a few that we can get to throughout the show. That makes you part of the show. So the better ones get on the show. And also, if you can do this for me, hit the like button. It definitely triggers the algorithm and helps us get this show to more MMA fans like yourselves that show up every Monday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. It's live. And we do it every Monday. We rotate the panel. So let's have some fun. Make it part of your weekly viewing pleasure. Topic 2. So all right, I'll come clean. Cejudo and Cruz are gonna fight at a fight night in Seattle. Only they're not fighting each other. So Henry Cejudo is in the main event against Song Yadong, and Dominick Cruz is gonna fight Rob Font on the main card, right? However, of the two, Cruz has stated this will probably be his last fight. He seems pretty certain about it. Is this madness or am I tripping? Should they have fought each other?
Yeah, it would have been nice. I've always been that guy that I just didn't want to see Dominick Cruz leave without fighting Jose Aldo, have him throw on them WC gloves. I've always wanted to see that fight. It just never seems to come to fruition. But it's not bad, George. Like I kind of get where they're going with it. For Dominick Cruz, I mean, he's the guy that, like, if you look at it, the first thing people are going to say is, well, this guy's just not that active and all that. But isn't he kind of like that barometer where when we bring up ring rust, we go, well, he did serve up Takeo Mizugaki off of like a 3-year layoff. So you kind of have to throw that out of the window. I think these are just fights that we look at and they're just fun, man. I think they're good fights. I think they're going to be a lot of fun. I think Henry Cejudo's in a situation where it's, I guess, shit or get off the pot, right? Like, we need to figure out where he's at in his career as well. So it solves a lot of things. It would have been fun to see them fight each other, but I'm okay with the way it ended up.
Dan, we know your feelings on rematches, but would you have wanted to see these guys, since it's been a while and they have some Arizona heat going back to the wrestling days?
I wouldn't have minded this one. I feel bad for the matchmakers. I mean, they must have blue balls all from hell not being able to make a rematch. We know how much they love those guys. So pouring out for Mick and Sean, poor guys. But no, I honestly wouldn't have minded this one, because speaking of questionable stoppages, this was a questionable stoppage back in the day. It was a dumb match because they were just trying to be the first back at sports, even if it sacrificed careers that were probably going downhill anyways, of Tony Ferguson or Dominick Cruz, favorites of mine, of course. I love that period. And an extra cherry on top of that first fight was Keith Peterson, who coaches wrestling, which means he knows that in order to get to anything, you have to go to your base and turtle. He knows what the turtle position is. Yet he stopped the fight there, because I guess turtling is an intelligent defense, although we've let more unintelligible defense go on. But forget. All I know is that fight has led to Keith Peterson purposely letting fights go and literally staring down the broadcast booth whilst Cruz has to tell that's good reffing. That's good reffing. Anytime someone's getting like that, fight has caused so much pain for our viewing experiences, whether we realize it or not, from the adjudication of Keith Peterson fights to Tom Cruise on commentary. I would have loved to see him just run it back. Put Keith Peterson back in there too. Let's just do it one more time so everybody can shut the F up. And I would have loved that rematch for that reason. But of course, we don't get it.
Cigarettes and the cheap booze.
Yeah, this is the fight. Yeah, that was the fight. Yeah, let's run it back. Let's go all rematch, baby. I'm with you, George. I wouldn't have minded this rematch.
How about you, Danny?
Yeah, I think the UFC dropped the ball here a little bit.
Why?
The rematch should have been made. Like, that is a proper. It sounds nice, right? Like Henry Cejudo versus Dominick Cruz 2. Like that has weight on it. That is very nice. And something that I like dislike from the UFC is, like, they're always kind of making the right move promotionally. And sometimes, like, you got to have some fun, man. Like, I get the whole thing. Like, these guys are on their way out. You want to use their big names to, get a Song Yadong going, and getting him a nice resume going. Same thing with Rob Font. Rob Font's a little bit older, but still, it doesn't seem like he's going to retire anytime soon, unlike Dominick Cruz. But, like, I saw Frankie Edgar get beat up by Chris Gutierrez. Like, I don't want to see that kind of stuff. Like, I want to see sometimes some fun. And it feels like the UFC sometimes is just making the right decisions. But, like, look around the landscape. Nobody's stepping at your heels. Like, nobody's coming at you. It's okay to have a little bit of fun. It's okay to treat the fan base and have them have some fun matchups and not always be thinking about, what prospect can we build up and this and that. Like, I would have loved to see a rematch here with Keith Peterson in it, the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, the storyline's there. Like, what storyline is there behind Henry Cejudo and Song Yadong? What storyline is there behind Dominick Cruz and Rob Font? Like, seriously, we didn't get Aldo versus Cruz, fuck it, at least let's get, you know, Cejudo versus Cruz. But it looks like that's not the case. So yeah, I absolutely hate it. And yeah, it's blue balls, not only for the matchmakers, but people watching. I'm sure they're gonna see these two guys weighing in and be like, fuck, they're not fighting each other. You kidding me? Yeah, I don't like it.
Dan, you wanted to weigh in?
I just got to give Danny props for mentioning that Gutierrez thing, because if he wasn't going to mention it, I was going to mention it, where Danny said it perfectly. Why do things promotionally when you can actually do things for fan service? Which, by the way, remember the Dana White vlog days? Remember y'all fans who were around for the golden era? That was like Dana White and the UFC's thing. They actually used to please the fans, guys. So when people like me are complaining, that's why. When people are me complaining saying the last year was terrible despite having UFC 300 and Max Holloway and Ilya Topuria, because it was terrible because of the freaking matchmaking. Because they missed the layups like Ghost said. Instead of doing Jose Aldo versus Dominick Cruz because you missed the Frankie Edgar one. And it's not even like they're doing it to promote guys, because look what they did with Frankie Edgar. They gave him Chris Gutierrez, who I love Chris Goody, but even the hardcore hipsters like me don't like Chris Goody that much, okay? And what did they do with Chris Goody after he knocked out Frankie Edgar? They buried him on the prelims like they do with all the other good bantamweights that I complain about week after week. I love C-Rod too, but George just mentioned C-Rod. How about maybe after the third or fourth undefeated guy you're trying to push and build, who C-Rod derails, maybe if you're trying to build prospects, actually build them. Don't give them C-Rods, right? They're doing the same thing to Usyk. Usyk needs a win. He was the guy, he was arguably rushed like Horiguchi, and now I forget who they're giving him, but they're giving him a terrible matchup. It's like how to kill prospects 101.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I know most
Asu Alimbayev or something.
Yeah, Alimbayev. Yeah. No name value. Terrible stylistic matchup. It's not going to do a lot for the division, despite it seeming like it makes sense on some levels. I mean, the UFC matchmaking has been piss poor for those of us who actually know what we're watching, and those of us who actually care about the promotion of these fighters getting built up. The UFC's been doing garbage at that. Sorry, just got to shit on the matchmaking.
I'd love to walk into that Tuesday matchmaking meeting with Dan Tom and say, Dan,
have
at. Let him have.
I'll be the no Joe. I'm on my way to be the new Joe Silva minus the success, because I feel like I'm being that annoying little prick that Joe Silva was writing in telling them how to do their job. But I'm sorry, man. They've been doing a freaking terrible job, and they got lucky with Poatan and Max Holloway. If they didn't have those things last year, they would have just had Ilya Topuria strong wins. Sorry, terrible year last year.
Real quick, guys, because we got to move on to the next topic. I'm talking real quick, just an early lean. Danny, Cruz or Font?
I'm gonna go Font. I mean, he looked great in his last fight. I'm gonna go Font, and I like his sort of rebirth under Tristar.
Goes Cruz or Font?
I'm gonna go Font, and it's gonna be bold.
Dan Tom, Cruz or Font?
I'm gonna cruise my way to the fence on this one.
All right, Cejudo or Yadong? You want to talk about Yadong?
I'll go Cejudo. I still think he's got some left.
Okay. Goes?
I think Cejudo still has something. It's gonna be close though.
Dan, you have any love for Yadong?
I think the matchmakers' dongs were disappointed they couldn't put the rematch together, but I don't think this dong will be disappointing.
All right. I think both veterans have good shots, but yeah, I agree. I think Cejudo it's not like he's been fighting more, because he took a long layoff too, but more lately. But they're both in their upper 30s. His wrestling still seems to be somewhat effective, man. So I like him there. But yeah, Font looked great, and his work with Faraz just seemed to uncover even other talents that he has.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on here. PFL. Look, I'm going to tiptoe around this one in the sense that it's water cooler talk, right? We haven't heard anything official from them. We've been able to confirm some stuff, and other stuff we haven't. So let's have some fun, but also we got to be fair to the audience and tell them, what the level of certainty is with what we're discussing. So PFL apparently is now going to be giving out prizes of 500,000 instead of $1 million. And who might be part of the regular season and playoffs? We're hearing it could be some of the younger fighters, right? Like what Strikeforce did with their Challenger Series, or what the UFC, I guess, groomed fight nights for versus their arena series, the numbered arena series. But again, water cooler talk. Let's go with the one that jumps out the most, Danny. There's something about that $1 million check. I'd love to hold a $500,000 check myself. I have no complaints about that if someone ever put one of those in my hands. But
you didn't get that in the
about
bonus
that $1 million mark? Hey, we've done it. It says something to it. What was that?
No.
Is he clowning, guys?
Little
No,
bit.
Oh, all right.
I
Danny, 500K versus a milli.
Look, I get it. The whole million thing looks nice. Bellator was doing $1 million tournaments as well, which looks cool. But if this means we're going to get some proper matchmaking and not just leave fights to luck and how the tournament plays out or whatever, I'm all for it. Scaling that down, like, sure, it might be, it's obviously less money for the fighters. But if you can sort of get that around to others, I think I'm fine with it. I don't think it needs to be $1 million. I think 500,000 is fine, so long as the PFL format changes. I don't want to see the tournament being the core part of their business model. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's a good strategy. I think matchmaking is the way to go. The UFC has proved it. So yeah, if this means we're going to get a little bit more matchmaking and we're going to get fights being a little bit more curated than just random stuff from the tournament, I'm all for it. Yeah, I think this is a positive change. And honestly, a must needed change, because right now PFL is in trouble. Publicly, they don't have the best image right now. They had a terrible 2024. And if they want to bounce back, like, you got to make some big changes. And I think this is it. So looking forward to this 2025.
How about you guys? We're in Vegas. We walk into some casinos, and it's kind of flashy to just see $1 million in a bulletproof glass case, right? And then that word millionaire, it just kind of jumps out in a broadcast. Well, do you think they're dropping the ball here, or are they on the right path?
Look, I was one of the guys that actually enjoyed the regular season, but I think it kind of ran its course. It's just done with. Like, you got to move on. I don't know how most of that roster is going to feel seeing prospects. I mean, 500,000 is still a lot of money, and they're getting paid that while they're kind of having their regular fights, not getting paid that. I don't know how that's going to come off, but the company's got a bigger roster now. They got the influx of the Bellator talent. Like, you really just have to change your strategy. You have to kind of reinvent yourself. If you're going to do the season and you do it for prospects, I mean, there were a lot of people that didn't like the season, and they didn't like it with pretty decent fighters in it. I can't imagine what they're going to think of watching it with prospects. So I don't know. There's a couple of decisions that I just don't agree with, but they really have to kind of step up and nobody's really going to compete with UFC, but you have to compete with time, people's time, right? Am I going to put Yellowstone on, or am I going to put the PFL on, right? There's times where Yellowstone's going to beat it out, or whatever, NFL football, college football. That's really who you're competing with, people's time. And I think PFL has to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Dan, Tom, any thoughts on PFL and what we're hearing behind the scenes?
Yeah, so I'm a fan of the $1 million. And the great thing about PFL with $1 million is you didn't have to have like washed up 50 Cent come out and give you a weird champagne golden shower in front of everybody. That was really awkward. Go see that Douglas Lima win, the most awkward thing you'll ever see. So that was nice.
Hey, come on, Dan. I didn't have a problem on you hating on rematches. We can't hate on 50. 50's 50-50, bro. As a 90s kid growing up in the 2000s, 50 is king, man.
I hear you. I'm coming back around on 50 after this. He is looking better after this post Diddy stuff. But as a dude who is all about the 90s hip hop, you can find me in the club, kind of it marked the death of hip hop for people like me, of old hipster heads like myself.
Curtis is a great album, man.
Yeah, I'll respect the guy. All seriousness, I'm taking a cheap shot. The guy survived a lot, but we don't have to deal with him on PFL. We got the tournaments. And the thing is, here's my thing. If you're going to get rid of the 100,000 and 500,000, I thought that was, that's super bunk, right? That sucks. You tell me the tournament's gone, sucks less, but still sucks in my opinion, right? But they do it together, guys. I think that's the key. They're doing it together, right? No. They're getting rid of the million, getting rid of the tournament structure, regular season. Now that to me makes sense. But to me, it makes even more sense. And again, like George said, this is just water cooler talk, guys. It's a speculation city we're cruising around in. If they were to absorb Bellator, I know things aren't looking good all around, but I'm saying if they were to absorb that roster, then I really think we see that freedom of the matchmaking that, Danny and Goes were talking about and alluding to, as far as like getting to open up that, that cupboard, so to speak, and match up the toys together in much more fun ways that perhaps the UFC isn't doing, right? So there is an opportunity here for it to be a good move. I will say that, even though it might not be looking good for them right now.
All right. Guys, for 2025 with the PFL, what do they need to succeed? Goes.
They need to stop spending money. Like they spend so much money on these Clarissa Shields of the world, the Jake Pauls. Take that large sum of money because you know they're getting paid well and spread it out among some decent veterans that are going to make you want to watch every card. It's not all about that main event. Sometimes it doesn't hit and people aren't going to watch. You got to kind of stack those cards a little bit better. And I think if you take the money that you would pay some of these people that we're just not really interested, we don't want to see somebody out there rapping on an MMA card. Give that money to some decent quality fighters, and I think people will show up.
Danny, what do you think? Any ideas?
Yeah, I agree with what Ghost is saying, and get some proper like quality matchmakers. I feel like the matchmaking's key. Look, most of this episode, you've heard Dan right here talk about sort of how he hates or dislikes a lot the matchmaking of the UFC, and he's right in a lot of things. I don't know share all of them, but he's right in a lot of things. Like the UFC drops the ball constantly, but they can afford it because there's no competition around. Like you're not going to be like, oh, this fight sucks. I'm just going to go watch something else because really there isn't at this point. So if you get some quality matchmakers, you have a really, really good roster. You can put some solid fights, some solid cards together that could compete at any given night with the UFC. So put in some quality matchmaking, give us good fights, get some good veterans that are still free agent. Look at all the people at GFL picked up. There's still some good fights out there that can be made. Go make them. Don't just leave them up to the tournament to figure that out or the smart cage, for God's sakes.
Dan, how about you, man? Any ideas for the PFL? You've seen so many promotions try different types of, matchmaking, antics, production ideas. What are your thoughts for 2025? What do you want to see?
Hey man, I know I'm coming out hot today, and I'm sure you guys know why, but I gotta agree with my guy Danny there. I think he really nailed the points, and I don't really want to step on that, man. He honestly he nailed it in my opinion. There's other stuff they can do. Maybe Ghost has more ideas on that, but I really think it's the matchmaking and maximizing your cupboard.
Look, they got a quality guy in Johnny Eblum and a quality guy in Patchy Mix, champions, right? But yet last year they didn't have those divisions. I would focus on bringing those divisions, introduce them via a Grand Prix. If you can only do one, then I pick one, I guess. I don't know. But I would do both and just create champions, create title defenses. That'll create legacy for these fighters. Starting a new season was kind of fresh. I liked it because at the time there was other promotions, but now it's like a 2-horse race, and you need to catch up to the UFC, who's just running away from everybody else. Create champions and create huge events that we want to tune into. Goes, it was so true what you said. The right game will pull you away from a possible PFL card, if they don't stack it enough. And what'd you buy Bellator for? It was to have a bigger roster and more intriguing matchups. So let's see what they do. To be fair, they haven't made their announcements, and when they do, we'll definitely tackle it. But guys, I think it's time.
One more thing, and cut the commercials. These events are way too long. We spend too much time on commercials and watching analysis and this and that, and not that much watching the fights. Put the fights a little closer together. Make the show a little bit tighter, please.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. There's some that drag on. I hear you. UFC 311 is this weekend, and we're all definitely excited. But before we begin, let me just express the sadness that Goes and I, the panel as well, but Goes and I are from Southern California, and after seeing some of these videos and pictures of the devastation of Southern California, man, it really hurts. We're from Orange County, which is about 45 minutes away from these fires, and this has affected some of our families, friends, colleagues, listeners, and honestly, our memories will be the only things that we have to hold on to from some of these historical places that have been decimated. Museums and national parks and other places, beaches. God bless the families that have lost their lives, their homes, or both. Even those that had that call, right, where they're telling you might have to evacuate. Imagine just even going through that and having a certain amount of time to get your most valuable stuff, and then the rest is basically it could be lost, right? And all you'll have is insurance. Strength to the first responders who have been working nonstop for about a week now, right? The firefighters, of course, but not just them. There's others that we can list: the doctors, the nurses, who have been helping people on the field, in the hospitals, the helicopter and airplane pilots that are, dropping the retardant or water or whatever. I see airplanes now in the ocean scooping water up. Other personnel from the city and county, right, that are organizing and already rebuilding where some of the fires have been contained. Strength to all them. God bless them. It's going to take years to rebuild, but as we've seen in other cities here in the United States, around the world, it can happen. It's a tragedy, but we will be back from this. I know that one thing that's going to happen in the chat room is y'all are going to go down the political route. It's a free country. You can choose to do whatever you want, right? But let me just tell you, spend more time on actually listening and seeing what you can do to help if that's what you want to do. And if you're just going to sit on the sidelines, that's fine. But my opinion, I think that the critical thinking people, right, that really want to talk about this, what's happening and what you can do to help, even if it's just sharing, maybe you don't have the resources, sharing or whatever, goes a lot further than the point fingers and the divide even further. That's my personal opinion, not MMA Junkies, not USA Today or anything. That's on me. That's my thoughts. But guys, let's start off before we discuss the card. Cancellations, moving, it's an option. The Rams are playing in Arizona tonight, not in LA versus the Vikings, but that's outdoors, not indoors. But it's a week-long thing where fighters are going to possibly be outdoors, and near breathing this air. The Inglewood Forum, it's called the Intuit Dome, is only about 15 minutes away from where these fires are. Goz and I, we grew up 45 minutes away from where these fires are. And trust me, when you've been around smoke like that, it's not good. Danny, what would you have done in regards to this?
Yeah, first of all, George, great words there to sort of set this up. Yeah, it's a complete tragedy, and I hope that any of our SBC listeners and MMA Junkie listeners who live in LA, they're all safe and they're good. And I feel for you guys. It does feel a little bit weird that the UFC is going on with this event. This is a terrible tragedy, and not only are they going on with it, but also, as you mentioned, like, we got to look into like the air quality. What's that like? How are these fighters? Can these fighters be affected by it? Can they have any underlying conditions like asthma and other things that could make this a lot worse and then really hinder their performance? I don't know. So it's definitely a bit weird, but we've seen the UFC try to continue events through the pandemic with an unknown virus. Not to get all political, we now are kind of past that, but at the time we didn't know what the hell was going on. They were still trying to put on fights. So it doesn't surprise me that this event is going on, but it does feel a little bit weird. At the same time, you can make the argument, well, people that had to evacuate or that are in the area and this is all they can think about, maybe this could be a distraction. And if things are done safely, like maybe this is something good that sort of takes their mind off the whole thing and can kind of bring some sense of normalcy if that's even a thing. But yeah, I gotta admit, like, it is a little bit strange. I'm a little bit, obviously, being in the on the East Coast, a little bit more disconnected from that than you guys. So I think maybe like Ghost would have maybe like a better analysis of it. But yeah, I gotta admit, it does feel a little bit weird that they're continuing this event.
Goes, what would you do? I think a cancellation is probably not what I'm in favor of, but maybe moving the location. And I heard T-Mobile is available, and there's a lot of arenas in California alone. Maybe just to kind of get it out of that. It's kind of close to that epicenter. It's really close.
Yeah, I would probably look into moving it. I mean, SoFi Stadium, where the Rams play, is only like 10 or 15 minutes away from where these fights are supposed to take place, right? So if they're going to move the Rams to Arizona, I think we're at the point, man, where it probably makes the most sense. That air quality is a very big deal. If you ever hear people talk about when they fight in Mexico City, a lot of people bring up altitude, but a lot of the fighters talk about air quality and how that took a lot of time to kind of adjust to the pollution there. It can really weigh on a fighter. So that and everything just going on, I think it just makes more sense. You have your home base here in Vegas. I'm sure you could figure it out. I would probably look to doing something like that.
Danton, what are your thoughts?
I just wish John Jones was on this card, because that would be the only way we would know whether or not a card's getting moved. We would ask the great John Jones what he would like. because for as much as people want to like pretend that California is somehow like the good commission because it has Andy Foster who fought. Let me remind you, they still promote, they still shamelessly took slap and got strong armed by the UFC. I was in the conference meetings where Andy Foster was really pejoratively and disrespectfully speaking to the Japanese commission when talking about their their version of their unified rules, so to speak, and trying to work with these commissions. So yeah, I don't take that stuff. And you guys are saying great stuff about location. That even me being a Las Vegan, I'm not familiar with California as much as obviously Georgian goes here on the panel. But I will say you guys are all saying one word that doesn't really track. It attracts because you guys are smart. You guys are human beings. You guys have common sense. You guys are decent. But you guys are using the word safety as if that's a thing that the commissions care about, which is a big mistake. Again, I know. Fighter safety and the well-being of fighters. I know that's what they're supposed to be there for. But as you guys can tell from my opinions on this show, or if you just, open your eyes and see the sport for itself, they don't give a shit about fighter safety. They will move a card from California to Vegas on a John Jones whim, or vice versa, I should say, from Vegas to California. But again, that's money. That's superstar. That's priority, right? Like, we're not really talking about what we're talking about are things like actual like public health and safety stuff that clearly the UFC has proven recently and time again they don't really care too much about. And these athletic commissions, despite it being their job, they don't give a shit either. So will I be surprised if nothing gets done as long as they can make their buck? No, not at all, folks, and neither should you.
All right. For those that are kind of questioning what we're saying here, let me just tell you, in the past, and I'm sure the UFC will change at least this, but they can be heartless at times. They've had weigh-ins at the Santa Monica Pier, which is like 5 minutes away from where these fighters are, maybe 10 minutes. They've had outdoor weigh-ins at the Honda Center before. I remember it was like UFC 59 or 60. It was a long time ago. So they have featured this because it's Southern California and the palm trees, right? I've seen fighters running outside hotels. That's what they want to do to shed that weight. Some do it in saunas or whatever. You have to go outside for some stuff. And again, you're exposed to smoke. So are your fans. So is your company. So that's all we're saying, because it really, really is pretty close. But if the fight goes on, we're obviously going to cover it. We're going to do our jobs. And, there are some good fights. But as of right now, we have not heard an announcement that they're not going to have it at the Intuit Dome. It looks like that's what they want to do. I think Joseph Boza put a quote from Dana. I don't want to say it without confirming that that's what he said. No disrespect to Joseph, who's in here every week. But it does sound like maybe Dana's taking the route of, hey, look, maybe this can take the minds off people, and maybe we can pay an homage to first responders. Maybe there'll be special invites to some of the first responders, which is something that a lot of professional teams did here when we had the tragedy of the shooting here in Las Vegas. Getting back to, the fight card itself, excitement level, putting the fires aside, what is it? I mean, this 2 title fights and a couple fights that have implications for future title fights. Danny, excited about that aspect of it? Is it to your taste how stacked this card is, in at least in my opinion? Danton?
For me, yeah, I think it's really stacked. You got people flying in from Russia, right, just for the main events.
Okay.
What's up, guys?
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, you got people flying in from Russia for the main events on these. It's kind of an international heavy card quietly as well, despite being domestic. And you've got some solid matchups throughout. I would say it's probably decent strength wise from the pay-per-views we've been getting post pandemic, but I wouldn't say it's a weak one by any stretch. So for what that's worth, even my cynical butt can give this card some credit, just judging it in a vacuum.
Danny, you like the card? You excited?
I love it. I think it's a great card, and I think this is really for the hardcores. Like, it might not have like the casual aspect of it, but like if you look at the fights, man, you got some bangers on here. You got a lot of fights that make sense, which I like. I give this card a thumbs up. Very, very good.
All right, and Goes, I imagine you feel the same as the guys. If not, you can tell me so. But let's just get straight into Makhachev. Is he kind of en route to being a 155 GOAT? He's possibly in line to have a fourth title defense, which would distinguish him from BJ Penn, Frankie Edgar, Benson Henderson, and his coach, friend, and mentor, Khabib Nurmagomedov.
No, I think he's on route to doing it. I mean, the stats are going to carry him. He's going to be in the sport for a while. That's what I think kind of hurt Khabib, was we felt like he could have gone a little bit more and maybe not been in this situation now, right? For him, it was for the longest time not having a loss, right? He just took one to Frontier Airlines, so that no longer exists. But the thing is that I kind of do is I think of them in their prime and what would I do if I matched them up. And for the longest time, I still felt like Khabib would win that fight. It's getting closer and closer to not feeling that way. We'll have to see. I think this is a really good challenge this weekend. I think it's going to be a really good fight. It's going to say a lot to answer your question, George.
I like that Dustin Poirier kind of made Islam dig deep. Showed that he was becoming immortal, but it showed him that he can be mortal. And we'll see if his teammate, Arman Tsarukyan, can expose some of that. What's your prediction, Danny, for Makhachev and Tsarukyan? No, you know what, Danny, your thoughts. And Dan, can he become? Is he close to becoming the GOAT at lightweight?
Danny. Yeah, 100%. And I think we need to stop sort of what would be the word, sort of man, I'm looking for a specific word that I cannot pinpoint right now. But we got to stop sort of glorifying BJ Penn just because, you know, it was BJ Penn, one of the coolest fighters to ever walk this earth. He certainly had a lot of success. But his lightweight record, if you really go look at it and try to romanticize and like put aside as a romanticization of it, it's really not that great. I really do think that there is an argument for Islam Makhachev here. Look at the guys that he's fought, like Arman Tsarukyan, that's a tough-ass title defense. Charles Oliveira, Volkanovski twice, at the time considered the pound-for-pound best, and it looks like he's not going to stop. So if he can rack up like one or more 2 title defenses after this, and by the way, I'll give you my early pick. I'm going with Makhachev. Dude, I think he's got it unlocked for the best lightweight ever and the greatest lightweight of all time.
Danny, real quick, as an OG, let me tell you something, man. I hear you. BJ Penn may not have the records that some of these guys have, but I think the reason we do glamorize him is he also became a welterweight champ and made it look easy that night.
But that's welterweight. We're talking about greatest lightweight.
No, I know.
It doesn't matter what you do at 170. What you do at 155.
It's all attached to BJ Penn. And here's another thing. It almost looked like he never even fought to 50% of his actual ability. Anyway, but Dan, what do you think, man?
I gotta correct you here. I gotta stick up. You can't just judge it off of record. And I will argue, I'll make the argument without leaving out the welterweight stuff. But in that case, can we shut the fuck up about Khabib, what he would have done at welterweight, or what Islam might do? Because I hear more about that talk, and none of that ever happened. It's because no matter what the record, no matter how bad BJ Penn has made himself look in and out of the octagon, by the way, you can't change the fact that if we're talking about a most courageous fighter, he was the most courageous. You look at Khabib's playbook, look at what Khabib was doing. Islam learned from Khabib. First of all, by the way, I think Islam is great, and I think he does have a chance. So in a way, I'm kind of agreeing with Danny. I just don't agree with any of the things he said before he got to his point, where I feel like everybody has been, and Danny, you can have your opinion, that's fine. But honestly, if we're looking at the general pop, most people have not glorified Penn. Most people have, for the last, not even recently, for like the last 10 years, have not given that guy his proper credit. And if anything, they've overhyped guys who I love like Benson, guys who I love like Edgar, guys who you can't deny like Khabib. I feel like those three have been overinflated, whereas Islam has a better argument over those three, which again kind of has me ending up in the same direction as Danny, you know. But I do got to argue again, it's legacy. Guys, you can't do the unfair thing and compare Pantoja's resume to Demetrius Johnson's or Demetrius Johnson's to John. These are different weight classes, different eras, or even if it's the same weight class like we're talking about, it's a completely different era. And those guys were good at the time. Joe Stevenson, these guys were good at the time, right? Diego Sanchez, guys. Diego Sanchez, you think about his terrible record. Dude, he was undefeated. He only lost to John Fitch and fucking Josh Koscheck up a division when he was on staff and sick. And those were still split decision losses. It was that BJ Penn fight, one of the best performances ever, that the guy who was considered the best, Anderson Silva, was like, no, I am not the best. When everybody is saying GSP or Anderson, what were those guys saying? They were saying that BJ was the best. What were the top commentators saying from like Boss Root and all these other guys covering this? They were saying that BJ was the best. BJ did the moves from, the leg wrap thing that Khabib does to the back takes to all these things, wrestling, winning titles for AKA, all that shit Khabib did. BJ did it first. Oh, wanting to go and do boxing matches? Okay. Now maybe you can reverse to the welterweight thing and say, well, BJ never boxed like Conor. Well, he was the one doing it first. Back when he beat Hughes, he was joking about fighting Tim Sylvia, and Dana White saying, I'm having to distract this guy by having talks with Floyd Mayweather boxing matches just to keep his hopes alive. BJ was doing it before everybody. The lightweight division wasn't even a division. It was built by guys like Penn. Khabib and Islam wouldn't even have had that division if it wasn't for guys like Penn. Because of all the divisions that have tried and failed, even the flyweight, as much as they give crap for flyweight, no division has ever been under more scrutiny than the lightweight division, which failed 3 times until BJ Penn was the one to pick it up. And around that time, what else happened? Coincidentally, the golden era. BJ Penn, even as not one of the top earners next to Brock Lesnar, was averaging we want to talk numbers? 400K averages pay-per-view before Twitter, before social media, killing the averages of champions now with the machine that the UFC has. When I talk about things are crappier now in ways than they were, there are numbers and facts supporting this. And you go and look at guys like BJ Penn's career, whom, by the way, was getting guys like The Rock coming backstage in 2008, was getting Jason Statham to come at shows. Who's coming in celebrities now? With all the celebrities, UFC pays celebrities now. And even with them paying and their access, you're still not in their IMG. You're still not saying people go to the camera, go, Islam Makhachev to the camera like Jason Statham was to BJ Penn. BJ captured the imaginations. Put some respect on his name. He is a lightweight GOAT. That's what legacy is about. Boom.
Danny, I'll give you 30 seconds, or you just want to let
No argument.
Okay, all right.
I want no
All
smoke from Dan Tom this morning. Pass on that, homie. Pass. I'm good.
All right. Hey, real quick, does Makhachev hang on to his title, guys? Real quick, over Arman Tsarukyan, or does Arman Tsarukyan get him in the rematch, kind of like what Dern did? Goes?
I think he's going to give him hell, but I think Makhachev holds on.
Yeah, I think so too, Danny.
Makhachev.
Dan?
Makhachev.
All right. In the co-main event, Murad Dvalishvili, do you guys agree with him? Did Nurmi get a quick road there to the title? Remember, he had to go through like 10 fights to get there, and I think he's kind of has some feelings towards this. But what are your thoughts here, Danny?
I do think he's deserving. You can make the case for Peter Yan and others, but look, he beat number 2. That was a main event. Figueiredo lost. This is the fight to make. I understand how Dvalishvili really feels, because he had to go to the end of the world and back to get his title shot. And it seems if you're in Nurmagomedov, you kind of do get an easier path. But we know the sport, it ain't fair, and this is the guy, and he's undefeated. And there's no question that he is the best contender right now to be fighting for the belt.
All right. And Goes, I got to pivot to you because we're going to end on time today. We have some other responsibilities amongst the team. Jamal Hill, does he get a title shot with a win over Yuri Prochazka?
I don't think so. Even if it's a stamp,
Ooh.
I mean, I don't think it'll happen, man.
Meaning Ankalaev first, but can Hill get the winner of Ankalaev and Pereira is what I meant.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think it's possible, but he's got to come out and he's got to make a statement, and what he says on the mic matters a lot.
Mm-hmm. Dan Tom Moicano, can he get a title shot? He's on 6 straight. He's got a veteran in Beneil Dariush, and all the other veterans have kind of taken these losses to Makhachev. So can he be that young blood that might get Makhachev excited for yet another title defense should he win?
I like Moicano here, and I'm bummed to see that Jamal Hill's no longer an underdog because I actually liked him.
Okay. And guys, keep an eye on Peyton Talbot. This guy seems to be one of those guys that's rising, and he's an athlete, comes from extreme sports, played a little bit of football or whatever, but he seems to see the game in slow motion. I really, really like that about him. It's a pretty stacked card, and Goes and I will be hosting a watch along on Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's the 4 fights on the prelim that are free that we can all watch together. But if you choose not to get that pay-per-view, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, we will be hosting the watch along there. We'll be your eyes and ears and tell you what's happening during this excellent fight card that the UFC has put together. Listen, thank you all for tuning in. If you can share this, to your friends, pass it via the DM, hit a like on the way out. Give me a dislike if you don't like it, but just react, all right? And subscribe to the channel, free content all day. We got to bounce a little early today. Go out and be a champion. We'll talk to you soon.